Business is the business of people, not products or services. So what I mean by that is get out there, find your tribe, and make sure that you are well known and well seen, that you are synergistic, that you are your brand for the first 5, I'd even argue 10 years, really.
This is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. For those of you new to the episode or new to the podcast, I'm Devin Miller, your host, and I'm the patent and trademark attorney at Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. We also, on the Inventive Journey, talk a little about the different journeys that startups and founders and small businesses take along their path to success. So today on the show, we have Dr. Jacqueline Darna. I will let her introduce herself because she'll do a much better job of that than I will. So welcome.
Thank you, Devin, so much for having me. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Darna. I'm the CEO and medical inventor of No More Nausea, No More Migraine, and No More Sleepless Nights, the first and only 3-in-1 patented way to stop your worst symptoms in just 30 seconds, utilizing my essential oil infused acupressure device. So thanks again for having me.
All right. Well, that was a great intro. As I said, you did a better job of introducing you than I would. So with that, let's jump a little bit back farther in your journey. So you're a doctor, obviously. You started out in the medical profession. So maybe tell us a little bit about that. How did you start out in the medical profession, and then how did you make the transition over to what you're doing now?
So I like to say that I used to be a drug dealer by day and a naturalist by night. So I did practice anesthesia, and again, I actually went back and got my NMD as well. So I am also a naturopathic medical doctor. So it was really interesting to kind of have that Eastern meets the Western world. As you probably imagine, everybody in our society, especially here in the US, is so accustomed to medications. But what's the problem with medicine? They have horrible side effects, and not only just horrible side effects, but it takes a while for them to work. Sometimes 45 minutes for your body to digest them. And then again, other complications that could cause you to have to take more medications. So I came out on my mission because I was a patient. And upon doing so, nothing else in the medical realm of medication ended up working for me. So I had to think outside the pill box, and that's what gave me my great idea. But so it was awesome. I love my patients, I must say.
All right. So if you to take that and dissect it a little bit. So I think it was that you said you were having some headaches, or that you were having a bit of
Well, yeah, I actually had my emergency C-section. So my first pregnancy went beautiful, perfect delivery, no issues, no complications. Now my second one, she's a beautiful baby girl, and that's probably why. So what ended up happening is I got sick for 3 days straight. So imagine, this is kind of like family in the hospital. Everyone, this is like one of our own, and we can't stop her from vomiting after her emergency C-section. So we tried everything, every medication that was actually listed and then not listed. We tried crazy things. And finally somebody walked in and said, "We're going to put you into a medically induced coma." And I was shocked. I'm like, that's the best thing we have here? And they're like, "Jackie, we've tried everything else." So I remembered one slide in anesthesia school about acupressure at what's called the P6 point of the wrist. And at the very same time, my stepmom came walking in with a peppermint plant that she had bought from Home Depot. And she said, "Here, smell this." I read it on Google. So I was very intrigued. Again, I was smelling leaves, and I had a piece of napkin that was literally taped to my wrist. And at the same time, I kept dropping the leaves because every time I would smell the peppermint, it really worked. So I asked my nurse for a piece of tape, and I made a wristband combining the two things. That was the only thing that ended up working for me. And believe it or not, I ended up, nobody else in the world had ever patented it. So I did. And here we are now 5 years later, and we're now in hospitals in 12 countries of the world and in 30,000 retailers.
All right. Well, that's a big jump from being sick in the hospital. We're gonna have to jump a little bit farther into that. So we'll go in, right? It's always the best part when you grow the company and it blows up and you do great. And but we'll jump into. So you're in the hospital, you're sick. You kind of come up with the idea of the wristband, helps out with the nausea. You'd use both acupressure, if I can say the word, as well as some, what would be peppermint or, otherwise essential oils or something that has that smell to create it. And so, but at the same time, you're still a doctor. You've gone through all of medical school. You've gone through all of your training. And I assume that you didn't just one day just up and leave the medical field. It's probably a bit of a progression. So how did that, from the day that you had the idea, how did it progress to, hey, I'm going to leave being a doctor at a hospital or a doctor or with clients and jump over to this business full time?
Well, I have to say, I think it was actually a lack of sleep. Hence why I created a sleep product, but that's later. I was like every other mom. I now have 2 children. I was up all the time breastfeeding, and my mind was racing because this was the only thing that worked. So I remember scouring the internet for a product that was like this of some sort, and there wasn't any. And so for me, again, I used to do what I worked my 7 to 5 in the operating room in the hospital, and then I worked my 5 to 7. And so I was naturally kind of not sleeping as is. And that actually gave me the confidence to try to write my provisional patent. Like, I literally wrote 15 pages of everything that I could think of, all my ideas. I used to be an artist, not an artist like professionally, but drawing for me helps to relieve stress. And so upon drawing, I was like coming up with all these amazing, incredible ideas. Like, how could I incorporate acupressure into a Disney band, for example, or into a back brace, or for other product lines, not just the wristband idea that I had initially. So I kind of put it all out there, and then, believe it or not, I met the perfect people. So my medical plastics manufacturer was actually the guy who invented the ketchup top. And then he had invented other products that are actually utilized in the medical plastic space. So he knew manufacturers, and his name is Frank. He took me up under his wing, and he's like, come on, kid, I'm going to help you out. And so we have a really interesting story, I guess you could say, because it was an instantaneous sense of almost like family. And upon doing so, he helped me tremendously. He helped me get started. I had product in 6 months, and then I was literally pedaling out of a bag, going to different doctors' offices saying, here, this is a really great product for moms with morning sickness. Once I started getting a little traction, I had my very first, I guess you could say, big customer, which was Stellar Enterprises, Stellar Airports. So I ended up getting into about 19 different airports. I still give them the lowest possible price. And then that showed me that it's not just good in the medical industry for labor and delivery, for surgery, for post-operative nausea and vomiting and cancer. It did translate into that retail space. So about 2 years ago, I went into that retail space, and about the exact same time, I ended up quitting my job full time. And the reason why is because my intern, she looked at me and said, you're amazing with your patients 1-to-1, but you can help 1 to 1 million with your products. What are you waiting for? So I jumped, but I also kind of snuck it in there that I had what's called my 3X rule. As long as I was making 3 times what I was making in the hospital, I said that I would jump. And then, of course, I built an incredible team. So we're 21 strong, and it's been really fun. It's been really an incredible journey.
Okay, so you blew past one that I'm sure people are going to want to know a bit more about, which is, okay, yeah. I mean, no secret, and people say the same thing about lawyers, so I guess I get the same thing. But, doctors make a good amount of money, or you make a good living typically. And, and so, a lot of people are going to say, hey, first of all, you went through, 10 years of school plus residency, or?
12, yeah. It's a lot. So, it's a long journse
So you do a long journey to get a medical degree, and you're making, in which is most people are going to say, okay, that's first of all, it's a great living. You're going to have probably a good amount of job security. And then you say, and you've invested, a lot of time of your life, and then
money. I'm a bootstrapped company. I must say that I am still
money. Yeah, law school's not cheap, but medical school's even more expensive.
Exactly.
And so you do all that, and then you get to a point you're saying, okay, I'm gonna not put it on hold or put it on pause, because you still use some of that, a lot of that with what your product is now. But it's a certainly different arrangement than what is a doctor and meeting one-on-one and prescribing medicine, kind of as a shift, right? So I would assume that you'd at least, whether it's you or the family or people or pushback, or how was that to say, okay, I get the 3X rule, and you're saying, hey, okay, I have some runway. If things go worse, I could still go back and be a doctor, and I have, a bit of a fallback if things crash down. But it still seems like it was a big jump, or, so how did you or the family, or how did that feel, or how did you finally decide to make that leap? And did you get any pushback, or did anybody think you were crazy?
Oh my gosh, I still get pushback. I always say that the hardest sales are my friends and family. They're like, you cannot possibly have invented something that helps me. But from the very beginning, I must also say, I was the sole breadwinner of the family for the first 10 years I was married, for example. So if you can only imagine, my kids had to eat. I was the sole breadwinner. So I had to make it work in order to put food on the table. So that was a real big driving factor for me. Again, I'm what they call a hustler. The dream is free, but the hustle is sold separately. So that was my push and drive, is these two beautiful children that I had, and to make sure that I really made this into something. And actually, when I did an article in Forbes, their favorite line was, my husband actually told me, he goes, you don't want to do what? You just graduated, you have tons of debt, and now you want to invest in making these wristbands for a living. He's like, you know what, whatever. You're making the money, so I guess I can't say anything about it, but there's no way that you're ever going to make this happen. And I was like, wait, just wait, I'm going to show you. And 6 months later, he was my first hire. So if that said anything, man, there's nothing like a woman scoring, right? So when you get the pushback from your spouse, now he's extremely supportive, and he's just my number one fan, my person that I can go to, because he had more business experience. I had zero. I never taken a business class, never took a marketing class. So for me, everything was kind of learning on the fly. I got what's called the MBA in the trenches. And I didn't really know I was an entrepreneur until I became one. And then now that I am one, man, it's like the cycle just goes hard, and I can't stop coming up with different ideas, and I can't stop pivoting. And my team is what I call the doers. I'm the dreamer. So they say to me, pin that amazing idea so for later.
All right. So so you made the jump. You just said, okay, I've hit my 3X rule. I decided, and I would still, it's kind of, you'd probably still have a fallback plan, and I'm not saying you want a little bit. I always look at kind of the old story of Cortez, and they land in America and they burn the ships. And so there's no path back, and you have to.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a little bit of always my mantra is to, burn the ships. You have to be all in order to make something work. If you're always looking, halfway looking back, you're never going to be successful. But was there ever a point after you jumped over, as you're getting things going, as things are starting to take off, that you're saying, man, maybe I should go back and be a doctor. Maybe I made the wrong decision, or maybe I shouldn't have done this. Or was it just great and you never had any second thoughts and you just took off?
I wish I could say it was all, rose petals and everything was amazing, but I do have to say there was a part of me, actually, what I call or consider my lowest point. I never knew that in getting into retail, what you sell it to them for in large mass quantities, number one, you don't receive an actual check for 180 days, sometimes even longer, even though they have net 45. Yeah, that's hilarious. That never happened. So there's a lot of rules and implications. There's a 5% for marketing, 5% for this. So there was a point in time where I ran my company based off credit. And I'm lucky that I have a really, really, really good credit score. And that's just because of the fact that I did my due diligence in paying off my student debt and my student loans. But that's the reality of it. I mean, it hit so hard at one point in time that I would sometimes pick up call shifts, and I would work on weekends, and I would pop in here and there because I was like, we are really tight, like just to make payroll. And then an amazing big break ended up happening. It's kind of like every time I go to fall, like I'm running all the time, and I go to fall, yeah, I get some mud on my face, but it never breaks my nose or fractures my face, if that makes any sense. So I feel like
it wasn't permanent.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a permanent structure realignment, but I really feel as though now I am Catholic. So for me, I know that I feel like this was my purpose, this was my mission, And I felt like I was being caught by the Lord. And he kind of just said, listen, pick yourself back up, and this is what I want to happen. And literally, like the day after I was considering going back, something incredible happened, and the U.S. government actually ended up taking my bid for making a sleep product for PTSD soldiers. And so here we go. I now have a third manufacturing plant. All the debt that I had inquired in making new lines was completely wiped away, and that just happened literally in an instant. So I picked up my family and moved to the middle of nowhere, Micanopy, Florida. And upon doing so, it was the best decision I ever did. I spent 1 year developing for them underneath my patent for No More Sleepless Nights. And now it's available for retail consumption and online, and helps people to sleep better. Hey, don't we all need that?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes you don't want to sleep so you can stay up and get things done. But no, I'm just kidding. So now I'm going to jump back just because I enjoy it, because you always get the highlights, right? You always get to hear kind of how everything was a success and nothing ever happened. So when you were in the middle, and you described what is probably what a lot of people end up going through is, you know, if your business is struggling, or you're having to figure out how to make payroll, or you're having to figure out how to make, you know, pay for the next run of production or that. And you oftentimes will go and look at whether it's debt or a loan, or you go to friends and family, or you're trying to hustle and, you know, get in some side income or that. But, you know, in a mix of all of that, how do you deal with it? I mean, because that's not an easy thing, right? It's going to be very stressful. You're going to worry if you're, you know, okay, I'm going to, you know, go mortgaging the house, so to speak, and not saying you went and got it on the house, but you have to go and you're saying, okay, now it's no longer fun or it's exciting in the sense that I'm not just making money out your fist. And so how do you deal with that angst or fear, or how do you keep moving forward?
So I've always been a planner. Everyone who knows me knows that I have plans A through Z. Literally, I go after A, B, and C. Usually, it's somewhere in the realm of F and G, where you finally end up kind of finding a sweet spot. But I, you know, have things thought over and over and over. And I have to say, from the very beginning, I mean, I didn't know how quickly we were going to scale and how fast we were scaling, because that was something too. When I started networking in with a lot of people who were in the capital realm, different VCs, and you'll actually probably find one of my old, you know, old decks or whatnot, like I'm sure somewhere on the internet, from doing a competition here or there, because I was inquiring about it. And one of my really good friends, he went that route for funding, and he raised 1.2 million at the same time that I made 1.2 million. So I always tell people, you know, time flies by, and you're going to either work on your company, or you're going to work at getting what you want, or at getting something monetary that you feel as though is good. And it's two different ways. I mean, me personally, hey, if you give me $5,000 to go gamble on, you bet your buttons I'll go, you know, because it's not my own money. I just felt as though that it makes me work harder. And, you know, juggling everything, especially from a financial standpoint, I did. I looked at a lot of different ways, and we're very lucky that every time we were about to sign a document, or we were about to, and I must say, networking with the people who are VCs, and networking with the people who are angels, for example, because I have a bunch of friends that are inside of that huge realm that would give me money in a heartbeat. And it's always better, because I tell them, they're like, what would you do with the money? I'm like, oh, I have this purchase order, for example, from CVS. I have another 6,000 stores that I'm fulfilling. And they're like, you need money to make more money? That never happens. So it's always important that you kind of go after the people that you could potentially want to pair with before you're in trouble. And so I've always done that. I've always surrounded myself with really smart people. I never want to be the smartest person in the room. And so that was my way.
I don't mind being the smartest person in the room, as long as there's a whole lot of other smart people. Yeah. I'll still take me the smartest. I just want to make sure everybody else is smart too.
Yeah, I don't want to be, because I have to say, maybe in medicine, whenever I'm, you know, speaking at a medical conference or something, I kind of feel like in my zone. But you put me in front of one of my really good friends. I'll leave his name out of it, but he was one of the first round investors for Facebook, for Uber, for Twitter. And, you know, I taught him how to salsa dance, for example. We grabbed drinks, and we laugh all the time because he just is this huge capital investor, and he's gotten me and introduced me to people that I couldn't have even imagined. And so again, him being a mentor, my fairy godmother, she got me meetings that I couldn't have ever dreamt of. And so it's been really fun.
So did you, when you were going through, so are you wholly owned? Did you ever take investor dollar or take anything, or are you own, you and your husband own it 100%, or how does that work?
100%. We are a woman-owned Latina company. That's me, 100% still, from the very jump all the way up through now. And the beauty of it is that we do have very good margins. And I have to say I respect margins now more than ever, because of the fact that with with the coronavirus happening, we already sell to different hospitals, and I just happen to know the insight on whenever they're getting large PPE orders from outside, because I do business with about 75 different manufacturers all over the world. So right now it's kind of a very interesting endeavor, because my company is also selling other products that aren't ours that have no margin. So I must say that our margins are nice and thick, and that meant that I was doing the right thing and able to keep myself bootstrapped, because I invest everything into the business, and then from there I'm able to grow it 1,200%, for example, and then I do the same thing over and over again. So for a small amount of money that I have to invest, I'm able to get a much larger return from these very large orders. So it's definitely a means of respect, but also it's the excitement of being able to, I don't have to listen to a board. I don't have to be told what to do. And by the way, I don't know if you know any Latin women, but it doesn't go over very well when people tell Latin women what to do. We're better at giving orders than receiving them, for sure.
Well, fair enough. So, so if you were to then jump, and somebody is looking and trying to decide, hey, do I bootstrap this? Do I try and figure out how to self-fund, or or take a side hustle to fund it? Or I've got an investor that they'll give me $1 million or $5 million, whatever the number is, but a large amount that will carry our company for a while. What advice would you give them, or how do you make that decision? I'm sure it's different for everybody, but what advice would you give them as far as whether or not to self-fund and bootstrap and side hustle, or take it? Because sometimes you take the investor dollars and it blows you up and you can make it big, and whereas your company might die in the vine because it goes under because you don't have the money. Vice versa, you give money out, you go in and take investor dollar. It comes with a handcuff. It can be different if it's a good investor or bad, and so great investors, but it still comes with, you're not fully in control anymore.
Yeah. I think there's like two things, because time is our most precious commodity. So the first thing I would say is look at your books and determine the amount of money over time. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but most people don't really do that as a time equation, but I do. So, and again, this has to do with whether or not you're bootstrapped, whether or not, your different clientele, whether or not it's VC capital funding. So you try to figure out how much money you can gross or make off of that money over a certain period of time. So some people, for example, they want to strike the pan nice and hot because it's like a time function. So let's say you are a gown or a mask creating company, for example. Right now is the time to take VC money and to blow it, because you basically have another couple of weeks of really high intensity. Versus someone like me, the 1980 sweatband of acupressure band, which was never changed for years. That was something they actually developed, the first acupressure band, the year I was born. So it's not old by any means, but it's getting almost like 40 years old at this point in time. So I have to say that, you have to decide and determine what that time factor. And then the second thing is just like dating, getting engaged and getting married. You're going to be in bed with that person, or whoever it is that you choose. And so I would hope, if we all remember back to our dating years, that you don't just jump into bed with every single person that comes along your path. You analyze them, right? Like you figure out what's in it for you, what's in it for me. And then that's how I know that I analyzed everything. I did it over a time factor, so amount of money I can make over time. And then secondarily, really, like, do I want to get in bed with this person? That sounds bad. Don't tell my husband that.
All right. We'll tell him not to listen to the podcast. But the point is, I mean, it is a lot like, And sometimes you're even with that person more than you are your spouse, and especially in the early stage in the startups and that, you know, a lot of times you see the people at work, and you know that more than you do your spouse as you're trying to get a business up and running. So it's very much like dating, or even sometimes more so, just because of the amount of time and effort it takes to do a business. Well, we are hitting up against towards kind of the end of the podcast, and I think it's every podcast I do. I always feel like there are about 20 more things that would be fun to talk and discuss and jump into, and never quite have all the time.
FYI, we're not going anywhere from our house for a little while. Hillsborough County, we still have an ordinance for about 2 more weeks, so I'm here just in case.
All right, well, maybe we'll have to do a follow-up episode, and we'll dive into a few more of the aspects that we didn't have time to. But as I wrap up, I always ask 2 questions at the end of the podcast. So we'll do that. And so the first question is what was the worst business decision you made?
All right. So I will say that 97X is a local radio station in Tampa, and they have a huge, the next big thing is what it's called. It's kind of like an alternative rock concert. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people go. I think that year was like a record year. We had like, I don't know, 8,000, 9,000, maybe even 10,000 people that were there. Everyone's partying. It's myself, No Mo Nausea, it's Budweiser, and it's Taco Bus. So it's like, you know, you get heartburn, perfect. We can help your upset stomach. You get drunk, we can help with the hangover. So I'm thinking this is like a sealed deal. I dump in about, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 as one of like the key 3 sponsors. And guess how much money we made at that concert? Just
by the way you set it up, I'm guessing not very much.
$70. Like we sold 7 bands, all right, after spending so much money. So I always tell people that was my biggest, most epic marketing failure. And you know why? Because that's not my target demographic. Know your target, know who it is that buys your product. My number 1, pregnant women. My number 2, travelers, cruisers, you know, people who love to take trains, that take planes, or business class people, for example. And then the third is going to be chemotherapy and cancer, so that they may have a better well-being. So I know that if it's outside of those 3 realms, it's just not my bag.
All right, so no more selling you bands to drunk taco eating partiers.
Taco eating alcoholics. There you go. I mean, let's be real. That's just not my demographic.
All right, well, we've crossed that one off the list. So, okay, second question I always ask. So if you were to have someone that's looking to get into either just starting out as a startup, or wanting, you know, always had that desire and wanting to get into it, and just starting out, what would be your number 1 piece of advice to them?
Business is the business of people, not products or services. So what I mean by that is get out there, find your tribe, and make sure that you are well known and well seen, that you are synergistic, that you are your brand for the first 5, I'd even argue 10 years, really. There's not a fight that I go on that I don't have at least one person that's like, hey, no mo, or what's up, no mo nausea. I mean, people, as long as they say no nausea, I'm fine with it. But again, I'm always, as you can see, I'm constantly branded. I even have swimsuits. I know that sounds crazy, but I sell more in a bikini than any other wardrobe I feel like that I've ever offered. It's a long story.
Always be selling, right? So
yes, always. If they, you know, and pitch to them if they have a pulse. And by that, I mean, you never know who's sitting next to you, from the plane, from, you know, just your local neighbor. My neighbor across from me is the CEO of one of the major hospitals that I sell to. And I had absolutely no idea until one day we just started talking. So again, you don't know who you're sitting next to, and you don't know who they know either. And so again, if you can display your mission, I tell everyone, I want to invent products that help give people a better sense of health and wellness naturally. And they become part of my mission. And so it's a we. They always say, I remember when you were the first. I remember your first pitch. I remember, and they always feel like they're a part of the journey. And so they're the ones who tell everyone, hey, if you're sick on a boat, go grab No Mo Nausea. If you are at home and have a horrible migraine, pick up No Mo Migraine. I mean, they are my true No Mo Mama squad. Like, they are my diehard fans.
Well, that's great. It's always great to have the evangelist that will go preach how great your product is. So that's awesome. Well, So we're wrapping up, and I want to make sure if people wanted to either find out more about you, connect up with you or your product, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Go on our website, nomonausea.com. There's tons of different blogs, and also hit us up on social at nomonausea. That's NOMONAUSEA on any social media platform. So literally, you can follow me. And what's actually really fun is that TikTok, the new thing, because that's actually me, my kids, crazy things that I end up doing. So people get to know who I am. And what's really fun is that they've been calling, and the office is actually directed into a secondary phone that I have. So I'm talking to all of people that are trying to give me testimonials, and they're like, you tell that nice young lady that I said thank you. I'm like, you're talking to her. So it's so much fun to get back to basics and to get back to the core. And that's the people that I'm helping.
Well, awesome. Well, I will definitely tell everybody who has that's not, except for which I don't really know any drunk partiers. So I'm in Utah. We don't typically drink, or we don't smoke. We don't party all that often. So I don't know. I wouldn't know a lot of those people anyway, but otherwise I'll share it with everybody.
With all the skiers, especially everything's going to open back up because it's no more altitude sickness. That's something that is actually a pretty big market share for us as well. So you can share it, being that Salt Lake is Park City is my favorite place to ski, and I think we talked about that before. So,
all right. Well, there you go. I'll share it with all the people that I know that like to hit the slope. So thank you again for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you sharing your journey. For everybody else that's joining, if you'd like to tell your story, your journey, you can always go on and apply to be on the show. For those of you that are needing help along your journey with patents or trademarks, certainly always feel free to reach out to us. We're at Miller IP. We're always looking to help startups and small businesses to grow their business and to protect it along the way. So thank you again. I appreciate you coming on, and it was a great episode.
Thank you so much, Devin.